Just
Hello, and welcome to Conversations with Dr. Stephen Greer. I'm Dr. Greer of SiriusDisclosure.com and Disclosure Project and CSETI. And I'd like to thank the folks at the World Puja Network for hosting us here every 2 weeks to bring you updates on what we're doing. This is a really exciting time because the film Sirius is coming out and has come out. And thanks to all of you who have helped crowdfund it, we're able to bring forward all this information to the public. And I want to point out that the film is really a portal into a whole body of evidence and information that we're loading up on our website, which is, again, Sirius, S-I-R-I-U-S, Disclosure, all one word, SiriusDisclosure.com. And there's a section on it of UFO evidence. You can hit that button, and it goes into file after file after file of photographs and images and top-secret military witnesses and government documents and images of this little being from the Atacama Desert and the CAT scans and everything. So that's really your source. And there's also information there about our expeditions under the stars. And, of course, our primary project has been and continues to be our diplomacy, where we are making contact with these visitors from other star systems who are coming to Earth. And I wanted to let people know that you can join me under the stars in Crestone, Colorado, June 2nd through 8th. And there's a link there at SiriusDisclosure.com for contact expeditions with me that you can go to and find out about that. And also here in Virginia, we're going to do a 3-day event under the stars on May 10th, 11th, and 12th. So those of you who want to join us here on the East Coast in the Blue Ridge Mountains, it'll be beautiful. And we're having the big premiere of the film Sirius at the Paramount Theater here in Charlottesville, Virginia. And that's going to be very, very exciting because that's a wonderful theater and holds about 1,000 people. And that'll be on the 12-year anniversary of the Disclosure Project launch at the National Press Club 12 years ago in 2001, so on May 9th. So it's May 9th, Charlottesville, Virginia, at the Paramount Theater. And information about that event, if you want to join us there, is also at SiriusDisclosure.com. So I wanted to let people know about that. And, again, thank everyone for their enormous support. It turns out that this film, Sirius, the documentary, is the most successful crowdfunded documentary in history. So we have made history in the film industry, as it turns out, by doing this, and we're very gratified. And it couldn't have been done without all of you who are listening and who have been supporting us so magnificently over the last year, and in fact many of you for many years, so thank you very much. I'd like to introduce a wonderful guest that we have today. Gelsheimer is a dear friend and a CSETI member and has been on contact expeditions with me in a couple of locations. And she's a clinical psychologist in Canada who has taken an interest and helped us research the exciting historical record about the star people and what some people would say are possible links to other civilizations that have had contact on Earth with people from the stars, and the traditions in the Native American, but also other cultures' traditions of having had contact with extraterrestrial civilizations. And the reason we're doing this is because there's some things about this very unusual Atacama Humanoid that was found in this remote area of Chile in the Atacama Desert that makes one wonder. And, of course, these are all things that we're in the early stages of discovering and doing scientific research on. But it makes you wonder about some of these traditions that all of you have heard about. And Anne is going to go through some of this with us and just share what she has learned and through her perusing of the literature, and of course there's much more information out there. We only have an hour, but I'm really grateful for Ann for putting this together, because she has taken on the task for us of looking into this and finding the references of the traditions where Native peoples have talked about making contact or having had an ancestry that has come from the people from the stars. So thank you, Ann, for doing this with us.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's wonderful. So first thing I want to do is just sort of, if you can, Ann, just share a little bit of the overview of what you found as you began to dig into this idea that some of the native traditions and oral traditions and maybe some of the written traditions around the world had this idea that humans had a connection to people from the stars.
Well, I actually had gotten interested in the topic when I was doing some shamanic studies in the past, and some of my teachers had touched on our connection with the stars, so I assumed there would be a lot of information out there. But as I started to look, it actually is quite a closely guarded oral tradition among most peoples.
Right.
And the traditions are now being shared. Many of the wisdom keepers are feeling that now is the time, given what's happening on the earth, the contamination on the earth, the different difficulties that we're facing, that now is the time to release this oral knowledge. So when I sort of dug into it, it was really looking at individuals who represented, different peoples from all around the world, looking at, North American Native Americans,
right.
Looking at people from Australia, the Maori from New Zealand, people from down in Peru. Very interesting and very similar. The information, and they talk about the similarities. They know that what their knowledge is within their oral traditions overlaps with the traditions all around the world, which is really fascinating.
Right, and it's interesting because my own background, my father was half Cherokee Indian, and in the Cherokee tradition, it's my understanding that they have, felt that they had descended from those from the Pleiades. And here where I live now in Virginia, the Shenandoah, in fact, my home, I'm looking out right now at the Shenandoah National Park from my farm here in Virginia. And Shenandoah, it means daughter of the stars or daughter from the stars, which I think is really an interesting fact. Most people have, of course, heard the word Shenandoah, but didn't know that that's what it meant in native tongue. So there are these traditions. So are there any specific ones you want to sort of begin to discuss that you found?
Sure.
That.
Yeah, if we start with just translations of names, that's very interesting. The Anishinaabe tribe, their translation of their name is people let down from the sky.
Perfect.
And the Hopi have also talked about being man let down from the sky. And I'm just looking back here. There's a whole bunch of them. Some of them have symbols that it's not necessarily their name, but the symbol representing the people has a sky reference or a star reference. For instance, I'm just looking at the Assoc. I hope I'm saying that right. Their symbol for their people is a staircase with people walking down from the stars.
Wow.
And the Iroquois, they talk about the first person who was, quote, woman who fell from the stars. And that idea is picked up in other traditions as well. For instance, in the Seneca Nation, they have a wampum belt that gives the creation story. And they talk about the different stars of creation. And the second star of creation brought woman who fell from the sky. So there you have that overlap with the Iroquois. And then when I looked at, where some of them were actually saying that they came from, where their actual star ancestors originated, most of them said from the Pleiades. I actually didn't find anyone who specified anywhere else other than the Pleiades. So the Cherokee would have come from the Pleiades according to their oral tradition. The Hopi, the Sioux, the Australian Aboriginals, and also the Maya.
Right. And, of course, in Africa you have others like the Dogon tribe that had another star system, and of course there's the tradition of the Egyptian and Vedic traditions that felt they had a connection to. Of course, the brightest star is Sirius, which is the name of our film, and Sirius, and also the entire Orion sector factors very heavily in ancient Egyptian and Vedic traditions, and of course in the Vedas, which I've studied extensively, there are accounts of the Vimanas and of beings that came from the stars, and they talk about that sector of space as being where they had contact from people, the star people.
Right, and this whole subject, it's present across all the native traditions. When I was reading, different accounts of individuals growing up within their own tradition, they talk about what their parents taught them and their grandparents taught them. And again, it's that oral tradition of we come from the stars. But at the same time, it's really taboo to talk about it, or at least it has been up until fairly recently.
Right.
And there's a woman, quite an interesting lady called Nancy Redstar, who's been
I think it's been taboo in the recent modern history. I doubt it was taboo pre-Columbian or hundreds of years ago. But of course, once the missionaries got hold of the native peoples in North and South America and Mesoamerica, then I'm quite sure it probably became quite taboo. But I think if you look at before then, it was probably something that was part of a very open discussion that took place. And in fact, as I've traveled around various remote areas of the world, when you meet with native peoples, they just go, "Oh yes, of course," even now. But it's one of these things where there has been this acculturation from the West that's made certain things taboo that would not have been, several hundred years ago.
Yes, that absolutely makes sense. And I think it's also because for a lot of the traditions, it's sacred knowledge, and they don't want to put it out before people who won't respect it. So the taboo is partly around protecting that knowledge as well.
Yeah, well, everyone needs to get over it, because now we're in a new era when everyone needs to know all these secrets that people have been sitting on, whether it's scientists at Lockheed and NASA, or the CIA, or people in their traditions, spiritual traditions. I was having a conversation with someone who was a Mason. I said, yeah, well, get over it. We need to sort of bring out all this knowledge now, because the Earth and the people need it, and we need to evolve from being a sort of a balkanized world of tribes and city-states and nations to a planet that takes its place amongst the stars with these star people. And that's the big leap that we're in the process of making as a civilization right now. And so that's why I think it's really good. What part of what I'd like to encourage people to do is that folks who are native, connected to native cultures all over the world who may hear this interview, is to encourage their elders and people who are holding this knowledge to step forward courageously and speak of it openly.
Yes, that's very true. That's what the wisdom keepers are now coming forward from the various traditions, and they're saying exactly that. We have to do it now. It's
right.
Essential for the well-being of the Earth and the preparation of human beings for our evolution.
Absolutely. Well, what are some of the other, I know you were getting ready to say something about some researchers who have found from various cultures some more in-depth information.
I was going to mention a woman, Nancy Redstar, who's done a lot of research in this area. So if people are listening to the show and they're interested, she has a documentary coming out on this topic and a book as well that's already available. But, she was talking about how hard it was initially when she was doing her research to actually get this information. She had to go down to Central America and Mexico, where she said it was actually much easier. The wisdom keepers down there felt much freer about talking about this information.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. One of the reason, and people may be wondering where the connection is with what's going on. Of course, everyone has probably seen the media coverage of what we're doing with this 6-inch tall, 13-centimeter being. And the reason I'm going to connect some dots here, although they can't be definitively connected, but I'm just going to open some ideas and some hypotheses to people. And as I do so, I want to share some of our findings. Some of you may have heard part of this in the media. I know it's been the number one story on Huffington Post in the past couple weeks and elsewhere. But it's now, of course, I can speak quite openly of who has been doing the studies on this little being now, so people understand, thanks to the generosity of people who have funded this film, Sirius, which is, of course, all of you listening. We were able to go to this institute in Barcelona, Spain, that a man had acquired this little mummified or very desiccated, dried out body from Chile, and this body was found in 2003 in Chile, and my understanding is that the man that has it now acquired it in 2004 thereabouts, and it was found in a remote, kind of a ghost town, abandoned village in the northern Chilean desert known as the Atacama Desert. And this is the driest place on Earth, by the way. It's an incredibly dry area, which probably benefited this little body in the sense that it was enabled to be very desiccated and dried out, and it was not subject to, the ravages of a lot of weathering. Now, it also means that it probably underwent a great deal of heat and cooling, because that's how deserts are. And when this man acquired it, of course, he's not a scientist or a medical professional, so he tried to get some initial studies done on it, but never until this fall was it able to be done really thoroughly. So I went over there with the team, and we clipped two of the right anterior front ribs, and were able to get bone marrow out of the ribs of this tiny, tiny, tiny little creature. And those ribs did have bone marrow in them. And this bone marrow, of course, is rich in DNA, and it was quite well preserved. So we put those in sterile containers and gave them to the scientific team at Stanford University, which is doing the studies. Now, one of the things that we did also was to get a CAT scan that was done that proved that this is not a hoax, that it is an organic, intact organism. And the CAT scans clearly show internal organs and what have you. Many people have said, oh, well, this can't be real. It's got to be plaster of Paris, or it's got to be what have you. And the scientific team at Stanford has stated unequivocally, this is not a hoax. This is an intact humanoid organism, and it is approximately 6 inches in length. The other thing that's been said out there, and it's on a number of sites, which is complete disinformation and a bit of a cover-up attempt, and part of it was fueled by the institute in Spain that's had this little body, by having someone look at it, just a physical specimen, who stated, oh, well, this has to be a fetus. Fetus, of course, being in the womb that was either miscarried or what have you at 15 to 20-some weeks of gestation. In terms of the size, this is the size of what you would expect to have if you had an aborted fetus at 15 to 20-some weeks, depending on the size of the mother and father. Now, what's interesting about that, anyone can go online, and I encourage people to, and they can see the X-rays that we have that are in the film, Sirius, at SiriusDisclosure.com. And then go look up the X-rays of fetuses at 15 and 18 and 20-some weeks, and look at the skeletal system, and look at this one. nothing the same. And the reason for that is that the level of bone development in a fetus is not at all that of something that's been up running around for a number of reasons. The womb is virtually an anti-gravity chamber. The baby floats in a sack of water, as you all know, and almost weightless. The bones are more like cartilage. There's very little calcium in them, and they do not have the normal what are called epiphyseal plates, which are the growth plates that you see in the long bones. Now, this is going to get a little technical, so you folks who are lay people and not medical, just bear with me. The big punchline here is that the CAT scan and the X-rays prove that it is an organism that is a humanoid and not a hoax, number one. And number two, the bone density and the epiphyseal plate development, which is where when children are growing, you have to have the what's called the growth plate. And we always look at this. I'm a trauma doctor, and if you have a fracture through the growth plate for a child, it's not a good thing because it can disrupt the growth of that bone. You have to be very careful. Now, the man who is the world's expert, not Stanford's expert, the world's expert on skeletal dysplasias, and literally wrote the book on skeletal abnormalities, is the man at Stanford, he's clinical professor at Stanford University, who has examined all of this. And I want to just share briefly from Dr. Lockman, his name is Dr. Ralph Lockman, his letter. And this is explosive. And it says that this specimen, I'm quoting, this specimen does not fall under any known class of disorders or syndromes.
Wow.
There is no known form of dwarfism that accounts for all the anomalies seen in this specimen. Most interestingly, now listen very carefully and be sitting down, based on knee epiphyseal standards, the specimen appears to be 6 to 8 years of age, and now we know it's a male. So this was a 6 to 8 year old male. It says, while there remains a possibility this is due to some form of progeria, which is an accelerated aging syndrome, in my opinion, this is very low probability. So the other thing that he talks about is that the abnormalities appear to be, one, the size of the specimen, which is not in accordance with an apparent age of 6 to 8 years, and two, what's called mid-face hypoplasia and underdevelopment of the jaw. And the jaw is very different from a human. And this is, I think, in conversations with this professor, he was most astonished by, and I'm quoting here, and that the specimen has only 10 ribs. Humans normally have 12 and rarely 11. So there is attached to this report, signed by Dr. Ralph Lockman of Stanford, and I have the original with each page of the technical report, which is, I won't share because it's very, very medical and it's all words that nobody would understand what it means. But the fact that the bone age is 6 to 8 years is very significant. Now, Dr. Manchon, M-A-N-C-H-O-N, of the Manchon Clinic, which is a large radiological center in Barcelona, Spain, where they did the X-rays and the CAT scan. When we put the X-rays up, the very first thing that she said, and this is the chief radiologist, was that this is no fetus, that this had been up and around for some years because of the amount, and she looked at the epiphyseal plates as well as the bone density. So when you read on some of these other sites that this is a fetus, the answer to that is not only no, but hell no. And the world's expert on skeletal abnormalities at Stanford University has stated so. So that you can hang your hat on. Now, therefore, a priori and forever, the question becomes, what is it? Now, at this point, we can say, we don't know. Now I'm going to get into something in the deep end of the pond here very quickly. This the rib clippings that we took on this tiny little few-ounce, 6-inch 6-year-old, which was a very delicate surgical procedure so that we didn't completely destroy the specimen. It was, we were sweating bullets, I have to tell you, medically. I've done plenty of medical procedures and spinal taps and cracked open chest and chest tubes and everything else, but this is, let me tell you, this thing is so tiny and so fragile but the genetic material was extremely high quality. And the man who did the work on that is Dr. Gary Nolan. Now, he's a PhD professor. He is the Harris Chair of biology at Stanford University. He did his postdoc at MIT. He has invented many of the state-of-the-art genetic processing technologies that have been developed in, Silicon Valley and at Stanford. And he did his graduate work and his PhD also at Stanford. But he is a full professor now at Stanford and has a very large lab. So Dr. Nolan has done the genetic work, and the genetic findings are really confusing. So in lay terms, what we know as of right now is that there is, now first before I go into this, so the public gets a picture, Neanderthals and humans have 99.5% identical DNA. A lot of people don't know that. A chimpanzee and a human is around 96, 97% identical. A mouse and a human is around 70+% identical genes. So when they ran the genetic on this, of course they were using very high-tech computerized systems to compare the genes of this humanoid to humans. Now what's interesting, and I can tell you from some emails I have from Dr. Nolan, the first thing he said is the strangest thing he's ever seen, and then the second thing he said is the damnedest thing he'd ever seen, is that it has DNA, it's male, has Y chromosome, it has a B2A marker, which is a marker for that part of Chile that you would expect to find in the mitochondria of females. Now, this is really interesting with what you were saying about the female tradition in Native American culture. And as everyone knows, I don't know if people know this, that this is not a myth, this is a scientific fact, that in the mitochondrial DNA, every person, every woman in the world can be tracked down to an original Eve, an original female. That is true in the mitochondrial DNA. You can go look it up. Take my word for it. Okay, so this gets very interesting, but this particular marker would be for that part of the world. So then it came out that there's something like 99%, which doesn't surprise me since Neanderthals are 99% identical to humans, 99% matching with humans. But there are 2 million base pairs of the genome that aren't matching. Now, this is a very high number. And so that comes to around 10% right now that aren't matching. So if you took humans, or is it 99% plus 10? Now, someone said, well, that can be junk DNA. It is not all junk DNA. And the question becomes, what is that? So now here's the other thing, and this is where it gets to be a real kicker. If you drill down into the known dwarfisms, because obviously if this is, whether it's a year-old or 6 years old, you can it's clearly not a fetus, and it's only 6 inches large. It would, if you said it was just purely human, it would have to have some kind of genetic mutation that controls for skeletal abnormalities.
Right.
And to this moment, as of the date that I'm doing this interview, they've looked at all those genes. Those mutations aren't there.
Wow.
So what is this thing? Now, here's where it gets even more interesting. if you were to take this and just take a step back, the question becomes, is the material that's showing up as human in this creature, did that come from us, or did our genetics come from them?
I was just thinking that.
All right. This gets into the chicken or egg debate that's going to put any mainstream theologian listening to this interview on tilt, to which I apologize in advance. It's also going to put the scientific community on tilt, because you cannot square, you can't square this circle, because here you have human genetic material, or so it appears, at least by a computerized printout. Now remember, to do this manually, when we did the human genome, it took something like $5 billion in a decade. And we're doing something on this creature, just running it through computerized. Now, it's the state-of-the-art systems at Stanford and elsewhere. There are 3 independent labs doing this that are under double-blind studies by one of the most prestigious geneticists in the world, Dr. Nolan, at Stanford. However, if that is true, but then there's this 2 million base pairs and 10% that aren't matching up, and the genes that normally control for skeletal dwarfism or skeletal, what we call dysplasias or abnormalities, those aren't lighting up and aren't being found. Then how do you explain what we call the phenotype? Now I know this is not a medical interview show, but everyone get educated real quickly here. The phenotype is the physical expression of a gene, okay? Like blue eyes, let's say blue eyes, okay? And there are genes that control for the color of your eyes. Everybody knows that. Now, what's interesting is that the genotype isn't matching the phenotype at all. So this is why this is one of the strangest things, and I think it's going to be years of research genetically to get to the bottom of this. And now, because we didn't gather this little body off of a spacecraft that said, hello, we're from this star system, you're never going to be able to say it's ET. But the question is, what is it? And I'm telling you, as a medical doctor who has been consulting with the top team at Stanford University, nobody knows what it is yet. However, in this part of Chile, there is a tradition that they came from the stars, that there were small people that had landed in the area. And we think that this little specimen, this little body, is decades to hundreds of years old. In other words, it predates the modern era of technology. Because some people say, well, maybe it was a human genetic experiment that went wrong. No, it's not, because it predates our ability to do that. We know that from what's called the DNA clock, the amount of cytosine that falls off of the ACTG in your DNA. You can measure and estimate how old the DNA is, and it's old. It's not thousands and thousands of years, like hundreds of thousands, but it's not modern. It's not recent. And you can kind of control for that, although we haven't been able to do the carbon dating yet because we didn't want to use up all of our material until we got the genetics run down, because you can only take so much of this tiny little body without destroying it. So the question becomes, let's say this is a creature, a little being, a little person, a humanoid. It lived decades to a few centuries ago. It may be pre-Columbian. We don't know.
Right.
How was it kept alive? Because we now know it's not an aborted fetus that was grossly deformed, based on the world's expert in skeletal dysplasias who wrote the textbook on the subject, and the opinion of more than one radiologist. We now know that it's got a lot of the same genes we have, and yet there's 2 million base pairs not matching. We know that even today, now I'll tell you, I've unfortunately had to deliver emergently what's called a precipitous delivery, when someone goes into preterm labor and have to deliver some of these really tiny babies, that are, 30, 40 weeks. But this would be on the order of 15 to 25 weeks, in that range at the most. even today in your best neonatal intensive care unit, you couldn't keep this creature alive.
No.
How did it live long enough to develop its long bones and its epiphyseal plates to the point that they are, to where this expert is saying it's 6 to 8 years of age and it's only 6 inches tall? It fits in the palm of my hand. So this is extraordinary. Now, we can't say it's ET, but we can't say it's just a normal human finding. It's an unknown humanoid, which still makes this an enormous scientific exploratory adventure. What we have to do is to go back to the Atacama Desert, and here's why. The man at the Institute in Barcelona that is actually physically holding this creature, this little body, went there with another a scientist. And they went to this remote area, and they were told, as they went further and further into remote areas, that there were urns and materials of more of these little bodies that had been found over the years and were kept in containers. Now, they never found them, but if in fact they are there, and Dr. Nolan has said this at Stanford, if you find 2 of these, game over, because you cannot have something that's this obviously different from a human, that's a human genetic defect, and end up with 2 of them that are because there is no syndrome in all of the medical literature that explains this particular morphology or phenotype or skeletal form of this little Atacama humanoid. There's nothing. And it's been exhaustively looked at by the world's expert in that area, Dr. Lockman. So what Dr. Nolan and I have talked about is that if there's a second one of these found, it's kind of game over. But what we have to do is to try to get back down to this area. Now, of course, to do a proper expedition with ground-penetrating radar and sonar and ultrasound and blah and on and on and on is way beyond the funding means that we have. If someone listening wants to fund and underwrite that, I'm all ears. It's way beyond our ability to do. However, it should be done because this could be an enormous discovery. And it's in an area where the native peoples talk about luminous, egg-shaped and disc-shaped craft coming down and going into the foothills of the Andes. And seeing little beings, little creatures that they considered star creatures walking and running around. Now, I've interviewed Ramon in Spain about this, and he has said that when they went there, they heard a number of accounts of people having contact with living little beings, perhaps not this small because this was obviously a child of some age. Whether you think it's a year old or 6 years old, it was obviously not a full adult because it did have epiphyseal plates that had not closed. And, of course, you and I, if you take a picture of our legs, we don't have epiphyseal plates because we've already closed our growth plates after we've stopped growing. That's what an epiphyseal plate is. It's where you grow your bone. So the question becomes, are there more of these? Could contact be made? Should we do a CE5 contact expedition there? How exciting is this, Anne?
This is amazing. And, you know, all through the different tribes that I was looking at, people talked about the little people.
Yes.
You know, and there's even a story I came across by a man named Oscar Rodriguez from Mexico City. He's a Mayan historian, and he talks about seeing photographs of a little being 19 centimeters long that was photographed by an anthropologist friend of his. This had been found in the Yucatan. And so this being had actually been witnessed by villagers leaving an ET craft. They'd actually seen a craft land.
Right.
This being left. The being died and was picked up and preserved by the villagers. But this anthropologist was on the scene at the right time and was allowed to take pictures and measure it. And the sound of it is so similar to what you're describing with this little being from the desert.
Well, are these pictures available?
I don't know, but we could track that down.
Oh, we must, because now here's why. We have just in the last couple of weeks found, and I remember this, you know, because I'm a doctor, medical doctor, and also the head of Disclosure Project. Back in 1996, I was contacted about a little ET that a woman had found or captured in Russia. And she unfortunately took it into her home, and I understand that she was not altogether a sound mind or something, but apparently it died in her possession. And this little being was named Alexis, Alexis, and this is actually on the Internet. And so Dr. Nolan and I recently received a videotape and photographs of this being. It turns out that it looks, the skull at least, and what have you, that we can tell, this is an old 1996 photograph and video, looks like very similar to this being. It's small. It's obviously more older because it looks like it's more like like the size you're discussing, more like 8 to 12 inches instead of a little 6 inches. And it's a physical specimen. And they were in the process of doing what we're doing now with this being when the FSB, or so the report says, which is what the KGB of the Soviet Union became the FSB, which is their intelligence service, confiscated the body and it's never been seen since. So what happened is that when I first heard about this in 1996, I had not seen the photos and videos that somebody had taken, but they had contacted me. But by the time those folks found me and I got back to them, this little body, deceased body, had been confiscated. And so there was really nothing to follow up on. However, what's interesting is that the photographs of it look very similar to the being from the Atacama Desert, but this one was found and captured in Russia. And so then the question becomes, are they related? Well, it could be, because here's something that's very strange. You and I have 6 skull bones, right? Everyone go to your atlas of humans have 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 skull bones. The creature, this little Atacama humanoid, has 4. And when I was reading the report on the one from this one found in Russia, it has 4 skull bones.
Wow. Yep.
Okay. So now this doesn't mean they're the same, but boy, there's sure some similarities. So this is becoming even more fascinating just in the last week or two. So this is a developing event and story, and I think that, of course, if it was on any subject except UFOs and extraterrestrials, there would be a Scientific American and Harvard University and a CNN and every network in the world doing something on it. But the point I'm making is that it certainly needs more follow-up, because what we have got to do is do a true ethnographic examination, as you've begun, on the story of contact and ancestors from the stars, and see if that's just not all mythology. I mean, my gut instinct has always been that it's not, that the native and ancient peoples knew what they were talking about when they said they had contact, and that in fact they had ancestors that were from the stars. And maybe that's what we're just now beginning to be able to examine scientifically, because again, this work is not being done by ufologists or aficionados of the UFO subject or New Age sort of folks. These are the most hardcore Ivy League scientists in the world, and they're coming up with these kind of reports, as Dr. Lockman said, that he finds this surprising, that this 6-inch being would be 6 to 8 years of age, and that the findings that he's seen don't conform to any known skeletal abnormality that he has ever seen. And this is, he's the clinical professor on the subject at Stanford University and literally wrote the textbook on it. So I think that the question then becomes, we can prove it's not a hoax because we have all the data. We can prove it has DNA. We can prove that it's not a fetus. And now we can prove that the genes have a lot that are like human, but there's some things that aren't adding up. And now that may be a manual DNA genetic study that could take a year or more, is what I'm hearing. So I want to put that caveat in there, because this is all very preliminary, and it's a little bit one of my concerns, and I want to be on the record, everyone listening, and the transcript of this needs to be put out there, is that when you try to take something that's an unknown and run it through a computerized system that involves billions of bits of data, literally billions, and hundreds of millions of base pairs and genetic material. And that's what you have to do, because you basically take the known mapping of the human genome and you put a sample like this in, but it's being done by computer algorithms. So the question is, it's kind of like all things with computers, garbage in, garbage out. How much of this needs to be looked at manually? Well, that, unfortunately, is a very laborious and expensive. As I said, doing the human genome originally cost something on the order of $5 billion and took 10 years and hundreds of scientists doing it. Now, obviously, we're not going to be able to do that with this, but so this is this first very professional pass through. And I won't get into all the technology that's been involved with this, but let's just say it's the state of the art. It's incredibly complex because you have to do it in a very special way when it's not fresh DNA. If you take a blood sample from you or me, it's very easy to run that and match it against what have you in these computers. When you're taking what's called ancient DNA, ancient meaning decades to hundreds of years, doesn't mean it has to be thousands of years old. There's a whole different set of protocols that kick in, and that's why it took us from October until really just now to begin to get these results back, because it has to be handled in a very specific way because you're dealing with DNA that's not fresh right out of a living organism. And that's a very different handling and processing. I'm not going to go into it because we'd be here for hours talking about stuff that would put people to sleep. But the point I'm making is it's been done by someone who now has his whole system set up, where if we get more samples, Dr. Nolan is excited about running them because now that's been worked out with the best people in the world at Stanford, MIT, teams that he's working with in Germany, all over the world. And by the way, this is a man who's on National Institutes of Health committees. I mean, it's a very, very senior scientist. So God bless him. Dr. Nolan's really done an enormous amount of work in the last 6 months without charge, I might add. I mean, he has done this in the interest of advancing science, as did Dr. Lockman. And so these are real heroes scientifically to take this on, amazingly, to do this. And we're very, very fortunate to have scientists of this pedigree and at this level of expertise willing to investigate something like this. But, from their perspective, because I know I've spoken to them, is that, my goodness, I mean, if forget the whole ET angle, if there's a previously unknown humanoid, human-like creature, or even if it's just a syndrome never seen before, this is scientific history, any way you slice it. And if it's what we think it is, it's transformative. I mean, this is an earth-shaking history being made. I think ultimately we're never going to be, you can't, there is no, one thing I want to point out to people, we don't have a database of different ETs and their genetic matrix to match this one up. You see what I'm saying? We're trying to match this humanoid up, comparing it to humans.
Exactly. It's a process of exclusion. It's not this, it's not that.
Correct.
You don't have anything to compare it to that's going to be similar.
And that's why it's very difficult. And I think people, take these leaps of language, and I'm trying to be incredibly precise. We cannot say it's ET, but we can't say that it's any known human or human syndrome. It most certainly isn't just an ejected fetus that was lost at 15 to 25 weeks. It has bone development of, according to Dr. Lockman, of a 6 to 8 year old. It has what appears to be a Y chromosome, so it should be male. It has markers in its mitochondria that would be from the mother, that's the B2A that you find in that part of Chile that are in humans. And then it opens up the enormously controversial discussion. Was this some type of epigenetic life form? Epigenetic meaning augmented hybrid. And, of course, there's a whole area of genetics that are beginning to be looked at in terms of augmenting and doing experiments with the genome. But, of course, this would have been way predated human technology to do this. So is this some type of epigenetic result? We don't know. Now, one thing I want to point out, and this I have not pointed out, and I know we're going to be running out of time in a few minutes, and this is, listen very carefully. This creature did not die because of any deformity medically. It lived, and it died of a traumatic blow to the right side of the body, fracturing its right humerus, which is the upper arm, and the right side of the skull, where there is a fracture behind where our ear would be. And there is a concave area where the skull was caved in, and so there was some type of a blow. How that happened, we would be speculating. However, it wasn't because it was some kind of defected human that lived for a little while and then expired medically, which is what you would expect with a 6-week-old fetus.
Exactly.
Okay. In other words, it lived, it was up and around, it lived for some years to have the bone development and the epiphyseal plates showing what they are, and you can go ahead and look at the x-rays we have on our site and in the film Sirius. And you can see Sirius at SiriusDisclosure.com. There's a little player there you can click on and look at it. What is this? Because if, those are all true statements, and they are true statements, then the question is, had it not been for some sort of accident or trauma or blow to the right side of its body, it probably would have kept on living, maybe to the age of the one that was found in Russia, you see. So because we know it was not a fully developed, because it had clear epiphyseal plates that had not closed. So extrapolating from human x-rays, those would be of a 6 to 8-year-old. And therefore, this begins to beg the question, how could a 6-inch humanoid live in the Atacama Desert decades to hundreds of years ago? I mean, you can't keep, if you had a 6-inch baby now, trying to keep it alive at the Johns Hopkins most advanced neonatal intensive care unit, you could scarcely do it. So this is all, none of this makes any sense. And yet these are the facts, ma'am, just the facts. I'm giving you now the facts. I can begin to speculate a little bit, and in my speculation I would say that it sort of opens this question from whence we came. What does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be ET? And, when I founded CSETI, the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence, in 1990, the motto, which we still have, is one universe, one people. Well, maybe I was more right than I knew, that not only in consciousness and higher consciousness and the non-locality and transcendence of cosmic mind that's within each of us, but maybe even down to our spiraling DNA matrix, we're more alike than dissimilar, that there's a morphogenic field in consciousness that carries through into the transcendent and through various dimensions into the physical dimension that gives rise to higher intelligent humanoid life. And we really are all related, and we really are all brothers and sisters in the cosmos. And that's my own takeaway from this, which is, I know, going a little off just the pure wearing my doctor's hat, but, that's what I feel, and that's what I think is so amazing about this whole discovery.
Well, if we go back to what I was finding in the different wisdom traditions, they say exactly that same thing. They're saying we are a universal people, we are cosmic people. And there's a really wonderful quote from a Peruvian shaman that I found. He said, "We are luminous beings on a journey through the stars. Mm-hmm. We are star travelers that have existed since the beginning of time." And that's what he's seen through through his training as a shaman, and that's also the lineage, that's the wisdom that they've held. This is coming from the Laika down in Peru. This view of ourselves as just having come from the stars, and this is just one more step in our evolution to be here.
Yes, from whence we came and to which we shall return. And so now we're at this point where we have the ability, if we can come together as a peaceful civilization, bring out these advanced technologies that we're featuring in the film Sirius, and become an enlightened civilization, that we can go back to the stars. And one of the things that's in this film, if people look at it carefully, there's a little section of it where an IBM engineer and executive is talking to the head of the Lockheed Skunk Works, the secret operations at Lockheed. Ben Rich, who was head of that, stated that we have the means to take E.T. home. And at the end of his talk, he showed a disc shooting off into space. And this was to a mainstream audience before Ben Rich died. And this scientist and this engineer and executive for IBM was there. And his name is Jan Harzan, a very good friend of mine. And he's in the film Sirius stating this. And it brings the question of, when are we going to come together and let the veil fall and let the truth be known, so that we can live on this planet without destroying it with oil and gas and coal, and bring out these amazing new sciences and physics, and all of us in peace return to the stars from whence we came. That's my takeaway on this, and that's really the objective of a serious disclosure. And it's a beautiful thought, and all we can say to folks is that at this point, everyone can learn to make contact with these civilizations. That's what we're doing with the Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind initiative, and there's a contact app that you can link to from our website, SiriousDisclosure.com. And if you want to come out under the stars with me and practice the remote viewing and meditation techniques that facilitate this sort of contact, you're welcome to come. I know, Anne, you'll be with me in Colorado, right?
And I've had wonderful experiences both at Mount Shasta and Marco Island. The experiences were just awesome and really very moving as well.
Yeah, and it's like it's something anyone can do, and we're people who are getting these techniques down and beginning to practice them are fine. I mean, we're getting reports from people who are truck drivers in Eastern Europe and people who are in Malaysia who are having these amazing sightings and contact experiences, because the real operating system here is pure conscious mind. And in the meditative state where we go beyond the linear and beyond space and time into the higher consciousness of our true selves, we can then see distant places in space. We can make contact with these ET civilizations because their spacecraft have electronic devices that interface with very clearly coherent thought. And we can then invite them in peace to make contact with us. And when we do, they come. We have never been disappointed. And so anyway, those of you who want to join us in Colorado in June, as I mentioned, it's June 2nd to the 8th. And then here in the mountains of Virginia, we'll be here for a 3-day workshop. That's the 10th, 11th, and 12th of May, which is the day after the Virginia premiere of the film Sirius at the Paramount Theater at the Charlottesville downtown theater. And all that information is on the website. It's SIRIUS, SiriousDisclosure.com, SiriousDisclosure, all one word, .com. And I hope that those of you who can make it to these events, that I'll see you soon. And I really do want to thank you, Anne, for the great research you did. This all needs to be incorporated into a report that I can append to my own hypotheses about this little being. And I really appreciate all the work you put into looking into this for us.
Well, I so appreciate what you've done in creating this movie, just the impetus to do this and what it's cost you personally. I'm just so amazed that the research is so worthwhile, the findings. I find it so exciting, and I'm very happy to help in any way that I can.
Thank you so much, and thanks to all the folks at the World Puja Network for hosting us here every 2 weeks. I hope this has been informative for people, and again, if you want to see more of the information about our findings with the Atacama Humanoid and the other work we're doing, it's at SiriousDisclosure.com, and until next time, keep looking up, and God bless all of you. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.